Well, good afternoon, good evening, or good morning, depending upon where you are in the world, and welcome to today's Security Boulevard webinar. I'm Charlene O'Hanlon, moderator for today's event, and I welcome you. As always, we have a great webinar on tap, but before we get started, we do have a few housekeeping items we need to go over. First of all, today's event is being recorded, so if you miss any or all of the event, you will have the opportunity to access it later on. Following today's webinar, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And we are taking questions from the audience. So if at any time during today's presentation you have a question for either of our speakers, please don't wait, don't hesitate, just use your GoToWebinar control panel and submit your question, and we will try to get to as many as we can near the end of today's webinar. Also happening at the end of today's webinar, we will be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So please stick around. Hopefully you'll be one of our 4 lucky winners. All right, with that, let's go ahead and kick off today's webinar, which is the future of active host vulnerability monitoring. Our speakers today are Sean Valois, who is Senior Sales Engineer at Lacework, and Pat Haley, who is Senior Sales Engineer also at Lacework. Gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Hey, thank you so much. And it's a pleasure.
No
Thanks
problem.
everyone for taking time out of your day to join us on this webinar. So I guess to start, pretty important, who are we? I'm Sean. I'm at Lacework. I'm a Senior Security Engineer. Functionally, prior to Lacework, I came from one of the major vulnerability management platforms where I helped our customers grow and develop their vulnerability management lifecycle as it pertained to their environments. Prior to that, I was doing security consulting where I was helping companies build their security operations programs. So I have a lot of familiarity with the challenges and the struggles that persist within our environments today, especially as it pertains to trying to build out a vulnerability awareness program as it pertains to cloud environments. And I just want to pass this off to Pat as well to get introduced.
Thanks, Sean. And we do appreciate everybody's time today. Similar to Sean, my background actually is in vulnerability management in one of the sort of traditional solution providers there. I've done a lot of work with customers in building and automating security workflows, security programs in general. So we're really excited today to talk to you about what we think of as the future of host vulnerability monitoring.
Perfect, thank you. And so to kind of give you an overview of what we expect to see and what we expect to cover today, there are really 4 key sections that we're going to go over. So what is Lacework? For a lot of folks on the phone, you may not even know who Lacework is today. So we'll cover a bit about who we are and what we do. Also, we'll talk a little bit about our platform as it pertains to containers and host environments. From there, we'll move into telemetry. We're really determining what should be fixed. This was an area that personally I've noticed a lot of my customers and in my previous role would have challenges with, especially when it came to huge amounts of data. This gets even more important as it comes to active packaging and ephemeral infrastructure. From there, we'll discuss how we can shift left in the DevOps process to build security into the actual pipeline. And then we will end with how to deal with constant change and generating alerts and making sure those are well implemented into your security program. And so functionally, the cloud has revolutionized the way we have to approach these programs. Back in the data center days, we'd have this rack here, which had, say, 10 servers talking to that rack over there, which had 5 or 10 servers as well. And it was very easy to understand what you had, how it operated, what you'd expect to see. The cloud introduced a lot of challenges as it pertains to that model. It's no longer these servers versus those servers. You might have, say, 5 hosts at the beginning of the day, 100 hosts at lunchtime, 1,000 at dinner, and then all the way back to 3 to 5 at night as you go through the lower processing load times. That's created an amazing problem, especially as it pertains to traditional security models. The good news is all the data is still there. It's just how are you going to get your hands around the data in a way that makes sense to you in your environments? So you have a lot of new items in place as well. You have your engineers, you have your cloud accounts, microservices, different APIs communicating with each other, scaling compute. And what that really means is all of these things combined are constant and consistent change that's ongoing in your platforms. The only thing that hasn't changed, unfortunately, is the overhead that you get to manage with. So your people, and of course, the overhead to the business as well within compliance. So the amount of people and the amount of effort that you can provide to it is the same, but the actual complexity is dramatically different. So the security context itself is generally buried. as my time in a security operations center, the first thing we had to do was try to figure out like all of the contextual information that we had to pair together to create a good event. We'd get an alert into our SIM, and then from there we'd have to validate the data to see if we could trust it. We had to figure out who did the activity that we're looking at, what happened, when did it happen, why or how did it happen. And that just generates a lot of different pain when it comes to the day in the life of your security operations center. But also what we're trying to do at Lacework is reduce that mean time to know. There's a lot of different things that are ongoing at any time. You have alert correlation in your SIM, first level investigations analysts who are looking at it, escalating to second level where some context might be lost. There's rules that have to be written or tuned to meet better security context. Once you have your rules tuned, you have people looking at them. And so you can suppress them if they don't seem to be working right today, but that introduces risk as well. Is this an actual problem? Getting to that point used to be very difficult. Is this something that requires escalation to a third tier? All of these different components really increase the amount of time it takes to go from alert to resolution. So what we do at Lacework is functionally try to reduce that overhead, try to reduce that chaos to give you something that's actionable very quickly. We want to get you to yes or no as fast as possible while giving you really rich and robust alerting. And so what we're doing is we compile huge amounts of data. We view this problem as a data problem first because you're getting so many more inputs. And so functionally, we're taking in different cloud environment logging, like AWS CloudTrail, Azure or GCP activity logging, and similar. We also take a look at your container images, your process activity on your hosts, different compliance details and infrastructure details, and we compile that all together. How we approach the problem, though, is just fundamentally different than anyone else in the market because we're taking a look at each of those machines or each of those cloud accounts, mapping the behaviors that we can expect to see. And then if something new or novel happens, we just let you know about it. It's functionally that easy to really get to how Lacework operates. Being able to know what to expect and then only tell you when something new happens, that's really interesting, especially as it pertains to your host and container environments. Functionally by design, containers should do a very limited number of things over and over and over again. And if they ever deviate from those things, you need to know about it. And that's where Lacework can really step in. And because of that, we want to be able to get you to action very, very quickly. And that's all the way on the right side of the screen here. But functionally, when we give an alert to a human, when we spend some of your personal time, we want to make sure we're getting you all the information you need up front, including the why, the who, the when, and the where. You can dig into the information if it ends up being something you want to research further. And then if you need to pass audits or things similar, we can provide context around that as well. And Lacework, of course, grows with your needs. So we are operating in the workload and container space. We act as a host intrusion detection platform. We can do file integrity monitoring to help you meet your compliance needs. And then we also are going to operate as a vulnerability awareness or vulnerability assessment tooling for your environments today. We take a look at raw security data across your environment. We can look at what your users are doing and how they're behaving in your environments as well. We're doing behavior analytics and activity over time to help show you what's new or what's novel within all of these contexts. And then we also provide that anomaly detection with all of the supporting information as well. There are two different pieces of the Lacework platform. We have our API only monitoring and integrations within your cloud accounts. But then we also have the agent component, and that's going to handle quite a bit of the activity we're going to speak to today. And so what we are going to cover today from the Lacework platform is very specific pieces. So what we're looking at is the agent components as it pertains to your container and host registry and vulnerability awareness. We're also going to show you how we integrate for host telemetry, and we're going to speak a bit to CVEs and threat and how we integrate with those. Now, all of this tooling can get very complex. What we want to do is make sure we're working where you work, because functionally it doesn't make sense to ask a developer to log into another tool to get output. Creating any roadblocks within that process can make it very painful as you grow and scale. And so if you're operating, say, an alerting platform such as Jira, Slack, Datadog, PagerDuty, ServiceNow, New Relic, we can get our alerting directly into those platforms for you to make it even easier to get the output. If you're doing development work and you're using tools such as CircleCI, GitHub, GitLab, Ansible, Terraform, we also work within your tool sets as well. We want to make sure that we're providing context, we're providing value, but what we're not forcing you to do is live in the Lacework lifecycle. so we can get that data really close to the end user. And so now, who is this talk today specifically for? If you are that enterprise that currently has a data center and you know you have those 1,000 hosts over here and those 500 hosts over here, we're probably not going to be the right shop for you. You probably already have a vulnerability management company that either Pat or myself came from, and you're probably operating those and doing your weekly or monthly scans. Also, if you're a heavy Windows shop, you probably have EDR tooling already in place. And so that's not really the market that we're looking to target today. The companies that we're looking to work with really are people who are doing nightly builds. Things are changing every single day. You're active in the DevOps process. There's constant builds being pushed, constant updates, constant things that are running. You're very ephemeral, scaling up and down with need. Servers that existed today might not exist tomorrow or down the road. Or perhaps you're just looking for something to give you a good landscape of your threat environment and then how those things pair together with the vulnerability data. If you don't have a vulnerability program in place today, we're absolutely someone who can help you at least get started. If you do have a vulnerability program in place today, then we can actually take our rich analytics, pair those together with your vulnerability management program to make it a much more robust system. And the reason why I use these words very specifically is it comes down to the idea that vulnerabilities and the way we manage vulnerabilities and the hosts they live on have dramatically changed. In our previous lives, hosts were treated as pets. Functionally, there was care and feeding involved. You stood up a server, you went through that build process, you got the bare metal, you racked, you stacked, you plugged that bad boy in, and then you're ready to go. Then you do your scan, you find those vulnerabilities, you patch them, you take it down over the weekend, fix those vulnerabilities, you bring it back up. Rinse and repeat until that server gets decommissioned down the road. That could be 3 to 5 years from now. You still do that today with things like load balancers or database systems, perhaps. But generally speaking, as we move into cloud and highly ephemeral environments, that process has just changed dramatically. Now, our hosts can be more treated like cattle. It's something that we get up, it does its job, and then when we're done, we can kind of cycle that out. They can be replaced as needed in, say, red-green or blue-green deployments, where, well, this set of our containers or hosts, we'll patch those, but we have an exact copy and replica that are running. When the new ones are up and patched, tested and working, we can just drop the other ones, and then we have our successful deployment. No one was the wiser. Same thing with containers. You can spin those up and down very, very easily. You can fix the base image in flight, deploy it to your new customers, and they're never the wiser. So it's that pets versus cattle comparison that we can use as we talk to much more dynamic, much more ephemeral environments. Once again, just kind of hitting on the previous method that you used to use for this process. You have your old infrastructure in place, you set it up, you scope it, you check on all the boxes you need to go through your purchase and acquisition process. Once it's there, it's deployed. You can deploy any security agents or any infrastructure and monitoring agents and things similar onto the actual bare metal or the VM. You schedule your nightly, weekly, monthly, yearly scans. You get that result back. If it's anything like previous customers I worked with, it was a few hundred pages and a few thousand results, and then you pick and choose where you can start because you have to make sure that system's up to date. But now we can deploy directly into your pipeline, make sure it's working, and then from there we can just really be laser focused on whether or not we even need to fix something. If a system only exists today and the vulnerability was live, but our new build has it replaced and we do daily rebuilds, you don't need to go and patch that. It's already been done. And so to get more laser focused, there's really 3 questions, and this is where we're going to start to focus, that everyone asks about cloud host vulnerability. So number 1 is, what should be fixed in prod? That's the where do I start question. Number 2 is, can we develop better host imaging? Like, how do I make this a better process down the road? And then lastly, we'll wrap up with, how do I deal with constant change? And so from here, I want to pass this over to Pat to discuss question number 1.
Thanks, Sean. So yeah, we're really going to segue from some of the intro Sean gave us here to start to answer these questions. Where do you start? What do you fix? And really, what telemetry do you need to find the vulnerabilities that actually matter? Another way of thinking about this is, it's the difference between understanding where a vulnerability exists versus where you're actually vulnerable, right? And that's what the state that we want to get you to in the cloud environment that you're managing. And because our platform and our company kind of thinks about modern cloud environments, we think about this problem a little bit differently than some of the traditional VM tools that you might be more familiar with. The questions are different, and the way you track progress, the way you remediate issues is going to be a little bit different. So that's really where we've built out our assessment capabilities. So let's get into this idea of what telemetry do you need, and how do you understand where to start. So here, if we start to think about, Sean's examples there of hosts and containers or cattles versus pets, those different models. One of the things that we need to initially understand is, what's online versus offline. What, in this world of understanding ephemeral hosts and understanding what's in production right now versus what used to be in production. This is where we can start to look at the data that we're getting from the hosts within your environment that tell us about, is this a machine that we've seen online in the last hour or two? That's maybe something we consider online. If we haven't seen that, if it's not live, then let's consider that offline. And this is, particularly important when you're trying to understand scope, right? So if you've got, an environment where you've got thousands of hosts that come online or that are online every single day, and maybe that scales up by a couple thousand, but those get cycled out. You really have to understand, what's my scope right now in order to understand, is this a critical vulnerability that's going to have an impact on a broad set of my environment? Or is this something that maybe we've already addressed through some nightly builds or through some other automated update processes? So we really want to understand current state when it comes to identifying scope and identifying what we need to prioritize in terms of remediation right now. And we'll get into some of the different areas where this plays a role, especially when it comes to how do you go about remediation in terms of, is it something you're patching in place, or is that something you're going back to the image that those instances or those machines are based on? Now, in the platform here in Lacework overall, just to give you at least a sense for this and how we're presenting this, at the very top of the screen, you can see a machine status filter. So you've got the ability to filter this just to online, just to offline, or just to all. Again, understanding what's online right now versus what the total scope is. And you can apply other filters to this as well, because there may be scenarios where you have machines offline that will come back, and you need to understand the breadth of that. This element of filtering and getting down to specifically what you care about is going to be really important. And we'll touch on that in other ways or in other contexts here. So the next thing that I think about in terms of assessment, so understanding online versus offline is really important, of course, but just getting a better sense for when we get that data, because this is an important part of the process in terms of how we monitor a cloud environment. So we have the idea of an initial assessment versus a continuous assessment. The initial assessment is going to happen once for every single instance or machine that comes online, right? That typically happens within the first hour. That's going to tell us about the current state of that machine. Now, on a continuous basis, every 24 hours, we're also going to assess that machine again. But what's important here is that we're going to carry that data forward. So instead of if you think about looking at reports from all of the different scans that might have happened historically and trying to kind of piece together what's active right now, what's the current status, what's been fixed versus maybe what's reappeared. Instead of doing some type of comparison across historical data, we're going to carry that forward and give you a single view of that host and the assessments that we have. Right, so we can start to answer questions like, how long has that vulnerability been around? When's the first time that we saw that vulnerability? What's the current status? Has it been fixed, or even has it reappeared, right? Maybe it was fixed at one point and there's a broken process that introduced some older software, some older version into your hosts, and so it reappeared. That's where that continuous assessment is going to be really important to give you that understanding of the full life cycle. Now, just to have it sort of a little more visually so you can get a sense for how the platform works just a layer deeper. This is really what happens through the process. So the host comes online and starts reporting into our platform. Of course, we're going to look to make sure it's something that's supported, that we can actively assess. If it's been online, we're going to do that first assessment. And then on the next day, that's when your kind of daily or continuous evaluation is going to happen, right? And so this process will just happens automatically. There's nothing you need to do. It's simply a matter of enrolling the instances of the machines with our agent to start collecting that data. So now that we've got a great view of the current state of the machine, we've carried that data forward, so it's really easy to understand even what's happened previously on those hosts. We need a way to start understanding how we can get to the things that matter most, right? And this is I think a classic way of doing this. It's an important way, right? The severity or criticality associated with a vulnerability, of course, is one way that you can start to do that. You'll see, I know it's a little tough on the slides, but you'll see the vulnerabilities column here will give you an idea of the highest severity of vulnerability present on that particular host. You can filter, of course, you can drill into hosts and get a better sense for what's present there. But we're going to talk about some of the other ways that we actually help you to filter down to what matters most. Again, getting back to what do you need to fix within the actual results here. If we look at this next component here, there we go. So severity, of course, is one thing, but there are other attributes or other ways that you might have tagged your instances and machines that are going to give you a better sense for what's important to you. Right? What are the things that have other attributes or characteristics that make it something you need to prioritize? So an example in this case is, if there's an external IP, if we know this is a public-facing machine or set of machines, and it's got critical vulnerabilities, we're going to treat that differently than as if it were not. Naturally, you can also apply your own tags and filter by those. So if you've got different groups that own different machines or different applications running on these, and you've tagged them in such a way where you can identify the things that are more important to your organization, more important in terms of business risk, we can apply the context of vulnerabilities and some of the other data that we're going to talk through here in just a minute. One of the, I think, important ways that you can do this as well is applying tags and filtering by AMIs, or the machine images, right? So we've been talking a lot about the machines, the results that we see in terms of understanding what's online and what's important to us and what severity. But if if you do have a very ephemeral environment, you're likely not going to patch in place, right? You're not going to go and push the updates in place. You're going to go back to the image that those are based on. And so being able to understand the results here and the impact to your images, that's a really important way to sort of prioritize or to understand remediation plans. We've all seen sort of classic challenges in vulnerability scanning where you just get tons and tons of data and tons of these long reports. Well, in the cloud world, one of the things that you want to be able to do is understand, how many of the, how many images are actually impacted by this set of vulnerabilities. We've had customers that have looked at, thousands of vulnerabilities and been initially overwhelmed by, assessment results and other tools. But when they looked at it with Lacework, we were able to very quickly understand it's only 2, images that those machines with all of the, the bulk of those vulnerabilities actually need to be updated, right? So now you're not, pushing updates to thousands of running hosts, you're updating a couple of images, and you're letting your automated deploy processes, really do the rest of the work for you. So that's an important piece and certainly an important way of thinking about remediation a little bit differently. And you're probably in a mixed environment. You probably have some that you need to patch in place versus others you want to go back to the image. But this is going to kind of cater to both sides of that. Now, the other piece that we think about quite a bit is in terms of the actual software packages on these machines and as part of these images, right? So we're in a unique position as a security platform that we can tell you about the vulnerabilities that are present within the software. But because we're monitoring your environment for threat detection purposes and for sort of overall visibility, we can actually tell you about the processes that are running and how those are tied back to the software installed. So we have this idea of identifying active packages within your cloud environment. What that means is that we're able to tell you, have we seen this package in use in the last 24 hours on this machine? And that means, have we seen the underlying process get launched, right? So that the sort of opposite side of that, it will be sort of an empty state. Can't guarantee inactive state, but we know if it's been active, we know if it's been used. And so that allows us to, correlate that to the vulnerability data itself, right? And so what that means is, if we go and take a look at the actual UI elements here, there's the ability to then filter on what's actually active in terms of the packages being used. So now you can take all of the vulnerability results that may be present within a particular image or set of software, and based on multiple factors, things like the severity, right? You want to treat criticals, highs differently than mediums and lows. But then based on the fact that you know what packages are actively being executed, your remediation plans are going to be a little bit different, right? If a piece of software that might be vulnerable but is never executed, never runs within your environment, you naturally can deprioritize that. And maybe you even, just in terms of reducing future attack surface, maybe that's something you pull out of the image. You're not seeing it actively being used, and you don't need to leave something hanging around that maybe one day could be compromised. So that's a really important element to how we think about this. It's correlating runtime data, what we can actively monitor on an ongoing basis, with the vulnerability assessment data to really help you prioritize what's important here. And again, hard to see in the image here, but one of the things we will tell you as a kind of a side benefit, we can also tell you about the actual file path where those processes live. So we get very detailed in terms of understanding what's happened on the machine. And so that kind of visibility can lend itself to root cause analysis and other IR kind of scenarios where you need to understand what lives on the machine at a deeper level. So those are, I think, the primary ways that we think about getting to what matters, what actually needs to be fixed, where to start. Your environments, will be different in terms of, what percentage of those are truly ephemeral hosts versus long-lived, and you can treat those differently. But not only having the data, but being able to make use of that and get to something actionable for your environment is really what we're focused on here. Now, one thing that you'll see just in terms of our platform and the life cycle that we follow is we're going to identify that status, right? So I mentioned this before, and we'll go back one. But we do have this carry forward mentality. So when we first see a vulnerability here, that's going to be new, right? The very first time we assess a system or the first time the vulnerability is discovered, that'll be in the new status. If we see that in subsequent assessments, right? If we see that on consecutive days, we continue to see that, that's going to take on an active status. It simply means it's still there. It's something that we continue to see within your environment. Now, if you get to the point where you've either pushed an update to those long-lived machines that are in prod, for example, or you've remediated through the image and you've redeployed, you'll see those go to fixed. And even if you've simply removed a package, right? If there's something present that you no longer want there, when you remove that package, that'll also show as a fixed vulnerability, right? We know it's inactive. We know it's been subsequently removed. Down the line, if that gets reintroduced, if we see that, again, because we're carrying that forward and we're giving you a current view of your assessments, that can also show up as a reopened vulnerability. In the future, what you'll see from us is introducing the status of suppressed. as well. So that's certainly something that we are intending to add in here so that you do have the situation where if you need to suppress something on a long-lived host, you will have that ability to do that within the future of the platform here. Now, we've talked a lot about the what questions we want to answer, what telemetry that we need to answer those questions, how you can do that as part of the Lacework platform. And really, so far, we've focused on the UI, but everything that we do here in terms of the results of what we're talking about, and even more, is available through the API as well. Now, we certainly understand that when the customers that we're working with oftentimes are looking for programmatic access, you're looking for ways to automate workflows and take advantage of the results here, or even potentially run your own assessments kind of ad hoc. Those capabilities are exposed through the API here. So depending on how you're going to pivot through that data, you might really want to go and look at all hosts, as you can see in this example, where you're running a get against vulnerabilities host. You also may, as part of kind of an investigation of a specific vulnerability where you want to understand scope. The sort of classic scenario: somebody says to you, hey, what's our exposure to XYZ vulnerability, right? If you want to understand what that looks like, you can very simply hit the API and say, tell me my exposure, my set of machines that are affected by this particular CVE. And while it's not shown here, what's also supported in the API are those various filtering mechanisms, right? So you have the ability to look at what's online right now, affected by the CVE, and applying other filters that we've talked about in the UI. Those are exposed in the UI, in the API to give you similar programmatic means. And then, as you imagine, you can sort of take the inverse of that and say, well, show me the assessment for a particular machine. Let me, kind of get the results from something specifically, so that we can get into that in more detail. Now, I'm showing you here the API and some screenshots in terms of how we've the endpoints and how you can hit those and the results that you get. We also have a CLI that makes it really easy and sort of gives you something that you can install and sort of interact with in an ad hoc manner. That's going to even abstract a layer here if you didn't want to go and build this out programmatically in some type of workflow. Now, to answer the second question, sort of in this overall process, I'm going to turn it back over to Sean.
Thank you, sir. All right, back on the mouse. There we go. So that brings us to number 2. Can we shift left and deploy better host images? So just take a pause for a second. Thank you so much for keeping up with us. I know it's a lot of information, but I appreciate the time. But can we shift left, right? Big buzzword, really popular concept, but it really boils down to, can we deploy closer to the source? It's very similar to what Pat was mentioning earlier with, let's fix the base image as opposed to fixing the 1,000 clones of that base image that get introduced down the road, right? And so functionally speaking, we have a few different life cycles that are in play here. You might have your operations team, which is deploying, building, and then running the golden image that everything else is built off of. You build the new image, you install any packages that need to be part of every image in your environment, security updates, things similar. You run your tests, and then you can promote that into your registry for use. With Lacework, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce a step in that process. And this is what we're going to talk about generally throughout this particular section. We're going to introduce a step that says, hey, I'm building a new image. I'm building a new container. Pause for a second, do the Lacework scan, give us our results. Let me know how I'm doing. What's key to this information here, the company I used to work for, there was an issue with, if you deploy an agent to the system, it'd be somewhere between 2 and 6 hours before you get your results back. You could kick it, you could force it manually, but it was very clunky. If you're going to run it with a traditional scanner, sky's the limit, because you don't know how busy the scanner is. If there's other jobs processing, you get in line and you wait for your results. As far as I'm concerned, if I start a job at 2 o'clock in the afternoon and you tell me the results will be back in 4 hours, you might as well tell me they'll be back in 12 to 16 hours, because I'm not going to stop my nighttime to deploy a second build. It just doesn't make sense. The Lacework scans, generally speaking, are back within a few minutes. On average, I'm seeing about 2, but we say closer to 5. So that's a really poor excuse. You can maybe get a cup of coffee, but you can't go home for the day when you do commit a build there. But we want to keep it really, really fast. And so in your pipeline, and we'll talk a little bit more about that down the road, but in your pipeline, we can just have that Lacework step, automate that process, keep security happy, make developers move fast. And that's really what we're trying to get to. Same thing for the developer lifecycle. You build the application, you check the host out, you add your stuff to the top of it, your application images and things similar. You install the applications, then you run your scan, and you can commit it to your registry, knowing full well what the results are. And so what we're doing is an on-demand scanning model. That's really going to be the DevOps use case. So they do their pre-flight checks within their CI/CD pipeline. So you may be using Ubuntu 1804 as an example. You do your update, use Yum to get your package listing, and then we're going to check that in. We run the scan, we validate the payload, and then we can give you the response with everything that actually happens and everything that is relevant to that build. So here is your output. You have 1 critical, 4 highs, 30 mediums, whatever that may be. And then from there, you can leverage your existing tooling to make the decision. Do we want to commit this build and allow it for use with the critical stand? Generally, if you're doing 20, 30 builds a day, that might not be a problem because that might only be up and online for 8 minutes before the next build takes over. However, that's something that you can make a decision within your current tool set to either say, yes, this build is still fine. We know about the risks, deploy it, or hey, we have to slow down because the build is too vulnerable, as an example. And this is really going to be functionally important. No development team I've ever worked with is going to log into a UI every single time they need to check the status of their builds, and that's where we come back to the API. This is really going to be how we integrate with a lot of existing tooling because your other tool sets don't log into the UI to get their info. They want it in the API format, so we provide you a nice clean JSON package. And that's what you're looking at here. And so we can get our scan results directly from the API, directly in the UI, and we just want to be flexible. And that's really our goal within the DevOps process. Keep you moving quickly, integrate with the tool sets your developers use, and keep security happy. This is just one sample. This is from HashiCorp Packer. And so functionally, we create the inventory shell script, build an AMI with Packer, upload and execute your inventory, and then you can save your outputs. And then from there, vulnerabilities can be discovered pre-deployment. This is a general example for HashiCorp Packer. We integrate directly into Jenkins, directly into Azure DevOps, GitHub Actions, any number of other tool sets. We have the ability to integrate natively into that tooling. And that's going to really keep your developers moving quickly, work with their tool sets, and then that way you can have that end-to-end workflow without having a lot of overhead and a lot of manual integration work to get this up and running. That was one area that's been a really big benefit at Lacework. We're a modern company, we're built on microservices architecture, and so functionally, that's how we work too. My previous employer, this was an area we had to start to grow into because functionally, that's not how we were architected 20 years ago. So we have the big benefit here of knowing the problems that these developers face. And so we have a lot of these integrations natively today. And so I'm going to pass that back to get us into number 3 and wrap it up.
Great, thanks, Sean. And I think, we've talked a lot about sort of workflow and different ways that you can, address this, whether it's, as part of the assessments that we do in the platform or as part of the sort of the shift left strategy that Sean just walked us through. But one thing we know is that in these cloud environments, we have to deal with constant changes. We sometimes deal with mistakes, right? Not the world isn't static. And so there's the sort of the dynamic processes and workflows that we know about, but there's also the unexpected, right? And so that's something we need to deal with in terms of the vulnerability assessment component here. So one of the things that we think about in terms of this problem is, what does that actually look like for dealing with that unexpected or those changes that that get introduced here. Sorry, let me just move the slide. There we go. So the way that we handle this is through alerting, right? We need to know if something unexpected happens in our production application environment. If a piece of software gets introduced outside of that pipeline, or an image doesn't go through that workflow that Sean just outlined for us, well, we need to know about that. We need to be alerted to that presence. And there's a few different scenarios that we have identified as really being the times when we want to generate that alert and get that into the hands of somebody that is responsible for that, triage and response. So the four use cases for this here are, if we have a new CVE gets published, right? There's a new vulnerability that gets introduced. And so we want to understand, is that present within our environment? That's new content, that's potentially new exposure or new risk. And so we need to know about that. And so that's a situation we'll alert you to. Now, we'll also tell you about a known CVE being deployed. So you might have a host that's already, that's been online that gets a new piece of software, sort of manually added to it, right? That you didn't expect, that went outside the normal chains. Well, we'll tell you about any known CVEs associated with that. We can also tell you if a severity changes. And while this might not be something that happens all the time, it's definitely something you want to know about. If there's a new vector exposed for a vulnerability, right? A new way that it could be taken advantage of, and so the severity changes, it increases. You need to know about that. You need to know about a change in the potential risk to your environment. And similarly, and I think this one's really important, if you've got vulnerabilities that when the last assessment ran, there were no fixes available. There's nothing you could really do to go and patch, so you deprioritize that. But now there is a new fix. It gets updated. That software gets an update from the vendor or from the developer. We'll tell you about that. We'll tell you that there's something you can act on that you previously weren't able to. I'll let you make the decision from there about, is that something you're going to prioritize? And one thing I'll call out here is, I think, oftentimes we think about alerts and vulnerabilities, and we worry about the volume, right? We worry about how many alerts are potentially going to be created. Well, we're doing the correlation for you in terms of, what happens during a particular period of time, what vulnerabilities and hosts fit into one of these categories. And so we're surfacing, alerts that are sort of correlated already. You don't need to worry about 1,000 alerts being generated. We'll tell you, hey, there's, X number of new CVEs on these hosts in your environment. And it's a single alert. You can then start to kind of figure out from there how you want to manage remediation, but you'll have the context of the exposure and of the impact, but it'll come to you in a single alert, so you're not being overwhelmed. You're not creating 1,000 tickets in that scenario. So that's an important distinction, just in terms of how the workflow actually looks like in your environment. Now, just to give you a couple of examples here. So this is a sample of the events timeline. Sorry.
That was my fault. Let me get you back where you were there.
So if we go back to the timeline, thank you, Sean. This is really, an example of a timeline of events, right? And this is more to give you kind of a generic or general view of this, where on the left-hand side, you'll see the timeline. We've got different severity filters. You've got different ways you can filter alerts within the Lacework platform. Now here we would be talking specifically about a vulnerability in an application or on a machine, but this is a sort of a general view. So if you were leveraging the whole platform, this is where you'd see any type of compliance violations. You would see alerts that have been fired as part of the like your monitoring of your cloud service. That's all showing up here. And again, really from a workflow perspective, these alerts can be sent out of our platform and into the tools that you used. Sean touched on some of those earlier, but that's an important piece of that here. Now, the other example I just wanted to show you here is a sample alert. Like what does the alert detail look like? So in this case, here's a known security vulnerability, right? So it's that second use case that I highlighted. We've identified that there are a number of vulnerabilities here. You can see the CVE, and it says in six more with the severity of medium. And then we'll tell you the host that it's actually impacting. In the lower right-hand corner, you'll also see related events, right? So yes, we've seen these vulnerabilities that have shown up on this host or on these series of hosts. Here are other related events, so you have a better understanding not only about the vulnerability, but also potentially other threat detection type scenarios. And that's something that we feel is really important to provide the context of, not only this alert and what matters there, and answering those questions you can see on the left-hand side, the why, the what, the when, but also the related events and other things that might be of value to you in terms of triage and investigation. Now, I hope, from the 45 minutes we spent together, and we do really appreciate you, giving us your time and paying attention to sort of what we're discussing here. We really do feel like the future of vulnerability telemetry is here. It's, it's different how you do this in the cloud environment, right? And so we've created, workflows that are different. Where today's tooling and traditional VM approach is oftentimes compliance focused. It's not built for that cloud scale and the ephemeral nature. It's not about the people that are building and the containers. It's really more on like just do we have vulnerabilities? Do they exist? Like, are they in our inventory? But it's not about what's my environment look like right now? What's active? What do I need to worry about in terms of where I'm actually vulnerable? That's where we come in. As Sean mentioned, we're a cloud security company that builds for cloud companies, right? That's who we are, and that's who we work with. So we're focused on efficacy. We're designed for ephemeral scale. We build for automation and DevOps style workflows, and we want to do that correlation for you in terms of, yes, there's a vulnerability, but you are actually vulnerable because that package or that process is being executed. Those are some of the takeaways there, but we really do appreciate you getting into that with us. Here's what we would leave you with, as Sean had said early on, Lacework can grow with you. We are a platform that covers, sort of a wide spectrum of cloud security use cases. The telemetry to find risks is easy to use. We have that. You can shift left with your hosts. It's not simply a container, image kind of workflow. That's something you can do pre-deployment with your hosts. And really, keep you focused on your business. That's really where alerts come into play. We'll tell you about, if there's something you need to actually worry about in terms of the vulnerabilities within your environment. That's really the end for us here. I think we'll, if we move on to the next slide, certainly open to taking questions, and I can bring it back to Charlene for that.
All right, great. Yes, we have about 10 minutes or so for questions. We've already gotten some in, but there's plenty of time, guys. If you have a question for either Patrick or Sean, please go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and get your question on in. We'll try to get to as many as we can. All right, let's go ahead and check out what our questions are. Let's see. Okay, as a SaaS provider, do you provide any certifications such as ISO 27001, SOC 2, etc.?
Sure. I'll answer that, Pat. Thank you. So functionally speaking, we do have support for ISO 27001 and SOC 2. So within our cloud infrastructure monitoring, we do have the ability to monitor your infrastructure to help you achieve those compliance goals. But also this functionality, this host intrusion detection, file integrity monitoring, and then of course vulnerability awareness, that's going to give you the ability to help map directly to your compliance needs as well. So we're able to provide you all of those components within our services today.
Excellent. All right, great. Next question here. How are you guys different than other vulnerability management platforms like Qualys or Nexpose?
Yeah, I can address that. Yeah, I mean, Qualys and Nexpose naturally they're longtime players, longtime solutions in the vulnerability management space. Sean and I know them both very well, but I think where we're different, and we've tried to highlight in many ways here, is we are built for cloud workflows. We're built for modern application development and operations teams. So being able to really focus in on what matters in those environments, how to deal with ephemeral assets and ephemeral hosts, being able to get into build pipelines to do the assessment as part of shift left. I think the modern techniques of deploying and running software need modern techniques in how you assess for vulnerabilities, how you discover and how you help to prioritize. That's those are the areas that we that we differ and folks find tremendous value in.
Yeah, and I think the only color I'd like to add to that is when one of the biggest pain points my customers had in my previous life was, where do I start? Because you get so much output, you get so much data back, and half of it, if not even more of it, could be for hosts that haven't been online in 6 months. Because that data management, that was actually something that was pushed onto the customer, because you never know if you wanted to look back in legacy environments to say, what was this server doing 6 months ago? But we give you that active status, which if I had the ability to give my customers that at my previous job, that would have been huge, because you now go, where do I start? Well, hey, you have critical vulnerabilities and the package is running and it's on hosts that are online. We're just building that picture, making it really robust. And that's been a tremendous value.
All right, great. Moving on, next question. How do you determine the severity of vulnerabilities that are displayed? Is it CVSS or something else?
Yeah, and seeing I'm already warmed up, man, my engine's going, so I'm just going to jump in there. We use very similar metrics to any other company in the game today. CVSS scoring is a big part of it. We use the CVE information and ratings, and all of that is where we derive our criticality from.
Excellent. Okay. Next question, in regards to shift left, how are you guys different from GitLab, which provides the same functionality for the code scanning?
Yeah, I think there's lots of tooling out there that can do kind of similar in terms of code scanning and implementing that. I think there are similarities in terms of how those work. I think it's when you pair the sort of the shift left or the build pipeline assessment with the ability to monitor in runtime not only the vulnerabilities, but to Sean's point, what's actively being used. It's a way to have a complete picture of your vulnerability assessment program and where you stand. And it's also a way where you can sort of tie things back. If you identify something in your production environment that has made it past that, you can make improvements to that, and you're going to have a consistent set of results because you're using the same assessment engine to do the build time assessment as well as what you're doing in runtime.
All right, great. We still have about 6 minutes or so until we have to shut down the question and answer period. So if you do have a question, go ahead and use your GoToWebinar control panel and get it on in, and we'll try to keep plugging through them. Next question, what features do you have for serverless workloads?
So serverless workloads are going to operate very similarly to really anything else. It depends on which kind of serverless you're referencing. Something like your Lambdas or your RDS or really anything that lives entirely serverlessly that you don't commit a build to, like EKS, for example, the whole story here is the exact same. You're still using your builds, you're still using your imaging. It's just going on someone else's machine, which, I mean, that's the cloud at a very high level anyway, but different story. For things that are completely serverless that you have no backend infrastructure control over, we do monitor the cloud security logging for that exact reason. And we provide anything that touches the API, we baseline that, we learn the behavior, and then if that changes, that's interesting. Why is this Lambda that's been doing backups and image processing every day for the past month now making DNS calls outbound? That's super weird, and that's something you probably want to know about. And that's how we approach serverless as well.
Excellent. Okay, great. Next question. Let's see. What integrations exist for alerts such as Jira, Slack, etc.?
Yeah, I can address that one. So just straight off the bat, Jira and Slack are absolutely supported, integration paths. In general, we build, think of them as alert destinations for customers based on demand, based on what folks are using. So you'll see, ticketing platforms like Jira or ServiceNow. You'll see communication, systems like Slack or PagerDuty, things like Opsgenie, Microsoft Teams. Like there's a whole host of those, as well as some more generic alert destinations. If you just have a homegrown system, but you can take in an email or you can take an incoming webhook, right? You have those abilities within the platform to configure your alerts that way. And the other big piece that I would call out too is because we can, we can surface alerts in sort of different contexts. So here we've talked primarily about vulnerability context, but Sean was just describing how we can monitor and surface unusual behavior associated with Lambda, right? And coming from your cloud environment. Well, you might need different destinations and different downstream workflows for those two scenarios. So you could have multiple channels, multiple sort of routes where those alerts go, based on the criteria that you've set up as part of your alert response workflow.
All right, great. All right, I think we have time for one more here. Does this product also contain DLP features?
Yeah, no, great question. Today we're not doing any DLP outside of a FIM, and functionally speaking, it's not traditional DLP. So we're not doing any scanning for social security numbers, credit card information, and things similar. That's just not a data set that we're processing today.
Okay.
Great question.
All right. Yeah. Okay. All right, great. Let's see if we have maybe one more that I can throw at you. Okay, here's one for you guys. How can I make use of this data in my security information and event management or incident event management or data lake?
Yeah, there are multiple ways that you can take advantage of that. We talked a moment ago about alert workflows. Lots of our customers are really using us as a way to get intelligence into threat detection and do that type of behavioral analysis or anomaly detection in addition to the vulnerability monitoring. So those alert channels that I talked about, your SIMs, if you're thinking like a Splunk or QRadar, or whatever you might be using, that's a natural way to extend those alerts and get those into those platforms for additional correlation, and maybe that's the tool of choice for your SOC. Additionally, we do have ways to export data in sort of mass. That's more of a scenario where you're looking to do something with the a lot of the underlying data that we process. So being able to push that data out to S3 for consumption, or to if you're using Snowflake as an example, we have a data share with Snowflake as well. So there's multiple ways that you can not only consume alert data into your SIM, but also if you had a use case for accessing some of the underlying data, we have export options there as well.
All right, great. Okay, well, we are about 3 minutes to the top of the hour, so unfortunately that is all the time that we have for the questions. I believe we got to all the questions, but if we didn't get to your question, I apologize. But please know that the folks at Lacework will be getting a copy of all of the questions that were asked, and I am sure that somebody from Lacework will be more than happy to follow up with you offline to get your question answered for you. Okay, just a reminder that today's event has been recorded, so if you missed any or all of the event, or if you just want to watch it again, you'll have the opportunity to do so. Following the webinar today, we will be sending out an email that contains a link to access the webinar on demand. And the webinar is also going to be living on the Security Boulevard website. You can always find it there. Just go to securityboulevard.com/webinars and look in the on-demand section, and it should be right there waiting for you. All right, I did also mention at the top of the hour that we would be doing a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. Our first winner today is Ariana E. Congratulations, Ariana. Second winner today is Colin E. Congratulations, Colin. Third winner today is Joshua B. Congratulations, Joshua. And our final winner today is Michael S. Congratulations, Michael. We will be following up with all 4 of you to get your Amazon gift card over to you via email. So please check your inbox. If you don't see anything there, check your spam folder. Sean and Patrick, thank you so much for a great presentation today. Lots of great information, and judging from the number of questions we got in from the audience, they got a lot out of it too. So thanks again. I really appreciate your time and your expertise. So thanks.
Hey, thank you guys.
Thanks everybody.
I also want to thank the audience for joining me today. This is Charlene O'Hanlon, and I am signing off. Have a great day, everybody, and please stay safe.